There I was, watching my husband climb into an ambulance with another woman on what was supposed to be our third wedding anniversary. The champagne he'd pre-ordered was still bubbling in my glass. The velvet box I'd seen him hide that morning was burning a hole in his jacket pocket, and I was sitting alone at the most expensive restaurant in the city, like some pathetic fool. I'm Rachel, and this is the story of how one phone call from his ex-girlfriend turned me from a devoted wife into someone I never thought I'd become. Someone who was about to make a decision that would shatter everything we'd built together. You see, David had been planning this evening for weeks. At least, that's what he kept telling me. Rachel, this anniversary is going to be special, he'd whisper while kissing my forehead in the morning. I've got everything planned perfectly. The reservations at Le Bernardin, that place where celebrities eat and normal people save for years just to afford one meal. He'd even bought me a new dress, this stunning black number that made me feel like a movie star. But here's the thing about David that I should have paid attention to years ago. Sarah always came first. Sarah, his college sweetheart, the one who got away but somehow never really left. In 3 years of marriage, I'd learned to recognise the sound of her ringtone. It was different from everyone else's, some stupid love song from their college days that he refused to change. And whenever that melody played, everything else in David's world stopped. That night, we were already seated, already toasting to our future, when that cursed song started playing from his pocket. I watched his face change. I saw the exact moment he stopped seeing me, stopped thinking about our anniversary, stopped caring about the evening he'd supposedly planned so carefully. Sarah? His voice got that soft, concerned tone he used to reserve for me. What's wrong? Slow down, I can't understand you. I sat there, fork halfway to my mouth, watching my husband's attention completely shift to another woman. The other diners around us were laughing, clinking glasses, celebrating their own special moments. Meanwhile, I was getting front row seats to yet another Sarah crisis. You fell down the stairs? Oh my God, are you okay? Where are you? Is anyone with you? Each question felt like a slap. Each concerned word he spoke to her was a word he wasn't speaking to me on our anniversary. I set down my fork and reached for my wine glass, taking a larger sip than usual. The expensive vintage David had chosen turned bitter in my mouth. This wasn't the first time, you understand. 3 years of marriage, and I could count at least 20 times Sarah's emergencies had interrupted our plans. The time she had a panic attack during our romantic weekend getaway. David drove 3 hours to comfort her while I sat alone in our hotel room. The night of my company's Christmas party when she called crying about some guy who stood her up. David left me to catch a ride home so he could go console her. My birthday dinner last year when she had car trouble. Again, David to the rescue while I finished my cake alone. Each time I'd been the understanding wife, the supportive partner, the one who smiled and said, "Of course you should help her, honey. That's what makes you such a good person." But inside, a part of me was dying. A part of me was screaming that I should matter more than his ex-girlfriend's constant drama. "I'm coming right now," he said, already standing up, already reaching for his jacket. That's when I saw it again. That little velvet box tucked into his inside pocket. The one that was supposed to make this night magical. The one that now felt like a cruel joke. He turned to me with those apologetic eyes I knew so well. The same eyes that had apologized 20 times before for the exact same thing. "Rachel, sweetheart, Sarah's had an accident. She fell down her apartment stairs and thinks her ankle might be broken. She's alone and scared, and the ambulance is coming, but she needs someone there." I stared at him. Actually, stared. Because in that moment, sitting in my anniversary dress at our anniversary dinner, I realised something that should have been obvious years ago. This would never change. 20 years from now, 50 years from now, I'd still be sitting alone at restaurants while David ran to rescue Sarah from whatever crisis she'd manufactured. David, I said slowly, my voice eerily calm, it's our anniversary. I know, baby, I know. But this is an emergency. You understand, don't you? You're amazing that way. You always understand. She could have internal injuries. What if she hit her head? What if... David! I cut him off with a voice so cold it surprised even me. She fell downstairs and hurt her ankle. People do that every day without needing their ex-boyfriends to hold their hands. He looked genuinely shocked. In 3 years of marriage, I'd never questioned his Sarah rescues. I'd been the perfect, understanding wife, the one who never complained, never made scenes, never demanded to come first in my own husband's priorities. Rachel, what's gotten into you? This isn't like you. Sarah is terrified of hospitals after what happened with her mother. She just needs someone familiar there with her. What about what I need? The words came out before I could stop them. What about the fact that I need my husband here with me on our anniversary? What about the fact that I've needed you to choose me over her for 3 years? His face went pale. We both knew I'd crossed into territory we'd never explored before. The truth territory. The place where I admitted that his constant rescue missions for Sarah were slowly killing our marriage. It's different, Rachel. You're strong. You can handle being alone for a few hours. Sarah is fragile. She's a grown woman, David. A grown woman who somehow manages to have a career, pay her bills, and live independently until the moment she needs attention from a married man. The words hung in the air between us like a bomb I'd just detonated. Other diners were starting to glance our way, sensing the tension. David looked around nervously, then back at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Part guilt, part anger, part something that looked almost like fear? I can't believe you're being this selfish, he said quietly. Sarah is hurt and alone, and you're making this about you. Selfish. He called me selfish for wanting my husband to stay with me on our anniversary instead of running to comfort his ex-girlfriend. That word hit me like a physical blow, but instead of crushing me, it did something unexpected. It set me free. You're right, I said, my voice getting stronger with each word. I am being selfish. For the first time in 3 years, I'm being selfish enough to think that maybe, just maybe, I should matter more than Sarah on our wedding anniversary. He stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the internal battle playing out on his face. Sarah's crisis versus his wife's feelings. Emergency versus anniversary. The ex-girlfriend versus the woman he'd promised to love and cherish above all others. And then his phone buzzed with a text. He glanced down, and I watched his resolve crumble. She's getting worse, he said, already putting on his jacket. The paramedics are there, but she's hyperventilating. She needs me, Rachel. I have to go. That's when something inside me just broke, not in a sad, defeated way, in a liberating, explosive way, like a dam bursting after holding back years of resentment and disappointment. Go, I said simply. He paused, clearly expecting more of a fight. Really? You understand? Oh, I understand perfectly. I picked up my champagne glass and took a slow sip, never breaking eye contact. I understand that Sarah will always come first. I understand that our marriage will always come second to whatever drama she's got going on. And I understand that you just chose to spend our anniversary in a hospital with another woman instead of proposing to your wife with that ring in your pocket. His face went white. How did you... I saw it this morning when you were getting dressed. Just like I saw you practicing what you were going to say in the mirror. Just like I saw you checking the ring size against my jewellery last week. I stood up, smoothing my dress. But don't worry, David. Go to Sarah. Hold her hand, comfort her, be her hero. Rachel, And while you're doing that, I continued, my voice getting dangerously sweet, I'm going to sit here and finish this beautiful dinner you planned. I'm going to drink this expensive champagne you ordered, and I'm going to figure out what it feels like to be someone's first choice for once. The colour drained from his face completely. What do you mean? But I was already reaching for my phone, scrolling through my contacts to a name I'd never called before. James, David's boss, the man who'd been sending me lingering looks at every office party for the past year. The one who always found excuses to compliment my cooking when we hosted company dinners. The one who'd once told me after a few drinks that David didn't deserve me. Rachel, what are you doing? I found James's number and looked up at my husband with a smile that felt foreign on my face. Cold, calculating, free. I'm being selfish, David, just like you said. His eyes widened as he realised what I was about to do, but it was too late. I was already pressing call. Go, I said again, waving him away like I was dismissing a servant. Sarah's waiting, and we both know she always gets what she wants. He stood there for another few seconds, torn between staying to stop whatever I was about to do and rushing off to his precious Sarah. In the end, Sarah won. She always did. I watched him practically run out of the restaurant, and I felt nothing. No sadness, no regret, no last-minute urge to call him back. Just a strange, wonderful sense of freedom I hadn't felt in years. The phone was ringing in my ear when the waiter approached. Mum, will you be dining alone this evening? I looked at him and smiled. A real smile this time. Not for long. And then James's voice came through the phone, surprised and intrigued. Rachel, this is unexpected. Is everything all right? Actually, James, I said, looking around at the romantic restaurant David had booked for our anniversary. I am sitting at Le Bernardin with a table for two, the most expensive champagne in the house, and no date. My husband had an emergency. His ex-girlfriend needed rescuing again. I was wondering, are you free tonight? The pause on the other end was exactly long enough for me to second-guess everything. Then James' voice came back, deeper somehow, more intimate than I'd ever heard it. I'll be there in 15 minutes. As I hung up the phone, I caught my reflection in the restaurant's mirror. Same face, same hair, same anniversary dress David had bought me. But the woman looking back at me was someone new, someone who was about to discover what it felt like to be pursued by a man who wouldn't abandon her for his ex-girlfriend. What I didn't know yet was that this one phone call would destroy everything. Because James wasn't just David's boss, he was also recently divorced, devastatingly attractive, and apparently had been waiting years for exactly this kind of invitation. The evening was just getting started, and I was about to learn that revenge, when served correctly, tastes even better than champagne. 15 minutes. That's all it took for my entire world to shift on its axis. I sat there, sipping David's pre-ordered champagne, watching the restaurant's revolving door like a woman waiting for her life to begin. And maybe that's exactly what I was doing. Because when James walked through that door, scanning the room until his eyes found mine, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. The thrill of being someone's destination, not their consolation prize. He looked different outside the office. Gone was the conservative business suit, replaced by dark jeans and a charcoal sweater that hugged his frame in all the right places. His salt and pepper hair was slightly tousled, like he'd run his hands through it during the drive over. But it was his eyes that caught me off guard. They held an intensity I'd only glimpsed at office parties, now burning freely without the constraints of professional boundaries. Rachel, he said, approaching the table with a confidence that made my pulse quicken. You look absolutely stunning. When was the last time David had said that to me? When was the last time anyone had looked at me the way James was looking at me right now, like I was the only woman in a room full of beautiful people? "Thank you for coming," I said, gesturing to David's empty chair. "I wasn't sure you would." James sat down, his movements fluid and deliberate. "Are you kidding? When a gorgeous woman calls me for a dinner invitation, I don't ask questions, I just show up." He paused, studying my face. "Though, I have to admit, I'm curious. Where's David?" The waiter appeared before I could answer, clearly confused by the change in dinner companions. James handled it smoothly, ordering a Scotch neat and asking to see the wine list. He didn't ask about the champagne already on the table, didn't question the romantic setup, didn't make me explain why I was sitting alone on what was obviously supposed to be a special evening. "David had an emergency," I said once the waiter left. "His ex-girlfriend needed rescuing. Again." James raised an eyebrow. "On your anniversary?" I felt a flush of surprise. "How did you know it was our anniversary?" "David mentioned it last week during the quarterly meeting. Said he had big plans tonight, couldn't work late." James's expression darkened slightly. "I have to say, Rachel, any man who leaves you sitting alone on your anniversary is an idiot." The warmth that spread through my chest at those words was dangerous. When had David last defended me, last made me feel like I was worth fighting for? "Sarah has a way of making everything about her," I said, then immediately felt guilty for the catty comment. But James just nodded knowingly. "Ah, yes, the infamous Sarah. We've all heard about her various crises over the years. David's constantly taking calls from her, leaving early to handle her emergencies." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a more intimate tone. "What I've never understood is why he thinks that's appropriate for a married man." The validation in his words hit me like a physical touch. For 3 years, I'd wondered if I was being unreasonable, if I was the problem for resenting Sarah's constant presence in our marriage. Hearing James confirm what I'd been feeling made something inside me uncoil. "You think I'm right to be upset?" I asked. "Rachel, I think you're a saint for putting up with it this long." James's scotch arrived, and he raised his glass to mine. "To a woman who deserves so much better than being someone's second choice." We clinked glasses, and I felt a shift in the evening's energy. This wasn't just dinner anymore. This was something else entirely. "Tell me about yourself," James said, settling back in his chair. "And I don't mean the polite small talk we make at office parties. I mean, really, tell me about yourself." When was the last time someone had asked me that? When was the last time David had shown genuine curiosity about my thoughts, my dreams, my inner world, beyond how I could support his career and tolerate his ex-girlfriend? I found myself talking about things I hadn't shared with anyone in years. My abandoned dream of opening an art gallery, the novel I'd started writing in college but never finished, my secret desire to travel to Morocco and paint the markets of Marrakesh. James listened with an attention that was intoxicating, asking follow-up questions that showed he was truly engaged. "Why haven't you pursued any of that?" he asked when I mentioned my gallery dream. "David thinks it's impractical. He says we need to focus on building our financial security first, maybe think about creative pursuits later." The words tasted bitter as I said them. "Later" had become David's favourite word whenever I mentioned my own ambitions. "That's bullshit," James said bluntly. "You're 28 years old, not 80. If you want to open a gallery, you should open a gallery. Life's too short to spend it living someone else's practical timeline." The conviction in his voice made my heart race. Here was a man who thought my dreams mattered, who believed in taking risks for passion rather than playing it safe. Our food arrived. The anniversary dinner David had ordered, now being shared with another man. But instead of feeling guilty, I felt liberated. Every bite tasted better than anything I'd eaten in months. Every laugh James drew from me felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I'd forgotten existed. "I have a confession," James said as we shared the chocolate soufflé David had pre-ordered for dessert. "I've wanted to ask you out for over a year." My fork paused halfway to my mouth. "What?" "The first time I met you at that company barbecue, when David introduced you as his wife, I remember thinking he was the luckiest bastard alive. You were wearing this yellow sundress, and you laughed at something I said about the terrible music, and I thought, this woman is extraordinary." I remembered that barbecue. I remembered David spending the entire time networking, leaving me to mingle alone. I remembered James appearing at my side with a cold drink and staying to chat when no one else bothered. "I tried to convince myself it was just attraction," James continued. "But the more I got to know you at these events, the more I realised it was something deeper. You're brilliant, Rachel. You're funny and kind and passionate about things that matter. And you're married to a man who seems to take all of that for granted." My cheeks were burning, but not from embarrassment, from the heady rush of being truly seen by someone. "James, I'm not trying to put you in an uncomfortable position," he said quickly. "I'm just being honest about why I drove across town at 9 o'clock on a Wednesday night to have dinner with a married woman. Because I've been hoping for an opportunity like this for longer than I should probably admit." The air between us crackled with tension. I was aware of everything, the way his eyes lingered on my lips when I spoke, the way my body responded when he leaned closer, the way this felt like the most natural thing in the world despite being completely wrong. "This is crazy," I whispered. "The best things usually are," he replied. My phone buzzed on the table. A text from David. "At the hospital with Sarah. This might take a while. Don't wait up." I showed James the message and his jaw clenched. Unbelievable. He doesn't even ask how you're doing, if you got home safely. Nothing. "He assumes I went home like I always do," I said, but even as I said it, I realised how pathetic it sounded. He assumes I'm fine with being abandoned. Are you fine with it? The question hung between us, loaded with implications that went far beyond tonight's dinner. James was asking me to choose, not just between staying at the restaurant or going home, but between the woman I'd been and the woman I could become. "No," I said, surprised by the strength in my voice. I'm not fine with it. I haven't been fine with it for a long time." James reached across the table and covered my hand with his. His skin was warm, slightly rough, completely different from David's soft office worker hands. The touch sent electricity up my arm. "What do you want to do about it?" he asked softly. I looked at this man who'd driven across town to have dinner with me, who'd listened to my dreams without dismissing them, who'd made me feel desirable and interesting and worth pursuing. Then I thought about David, sitting in a hospital waiting room with his ex-girlfriend, sending me dismissive texts about not waiting up. "I want to feel alive again," I said. "I want to remember what it's like to be someone's first choice." James's thumb traced across my knuckles. "You could be mine." The words should have terrified me. Instead, they felt like coming home. "The question is," he continued, his voice low and intimate, "what are you willing to do about it?" I thought about David's ring, still sitting in his jacket pocket at some hospital. I thought about 3 years of being understanding, accommodating, second place. I thought about the woman I used to be before I became someone who accepted crumbs of attention. "Something I should have done a long time ago," I said. James smiled, and it was like the sun coming out. "Good, because I have some ideas about how we can make this evening even more memorable." He signalled for the check, and I felt a thrill of anticipation mixed with terror. Whatever was about to happen would change everything. There would be no going back from this moment, no pretending this dinner was just innocent revenge. "James," I said as he helped me into my coat, his hands lingering on my shoulders, "what happens after tonight?" He turned me to face him, his hands still on my shoulders, his eyes intense. That depends on what you want to happen, Rachel. But I can promise you this. If you give me a chance, I'll never make you feel like second choice. Not ever. As we walked out of the restaurant together, I caught our reflection in the window. We looked like a couple, a real couple, where both people wanted to be there, where both people were choosing each other. My phone buzzed again. Another text from David. Sarah's ankle is sprained, not broken, but she's having a panic attack about the medical bills. Might be here all night. Sorry about dinner. Sorry about dinner. Not sorry about abandoning me on our anniversary. Not sorry about choosing his ex-girlfriend over his wife. Sorry about dinner, like I was a business meeting he'd had to reschedule. I turned off my phone and slipped it into my purse. Everything okay? James asked. I looked up at him, this man who'd made me feel more alive in 3 hours than David had in 3 years, and made the decision that would change everything. Everything's perfect, I said. What did you have in mind for the rest of the evening? His smile was answer enough. James's car was nothing like David's practical sedan. This was a sleek black Mercedes, the kind of car that whispered success and confidence. As he opened the passenger door for me, when was the last time David had done that? I felt like I was stepping into a different version of my life. Where are we going? I asked as he slid into the driver's seat, his cologne filling the space between us with something dark and intoxicating. My penthouse isn't far from here, he said, his hand briefly covering mine on the centre console. We could have a proper nightcap, continue our conversation without interruption. His penthouse. The word sent a thrill through me that I hadn't felt in years. Going to James's place would cross every line I'd drawn in my marriage, would make this night impossible to explain away as innocent dinner between colleagues. I shouldn't, I said, but my voice lacked conviction. James didn't pressure me. Instead, he started the car, the engine purring to life like a satisfied cat. What you should do, Rachel, is whatever makes you feel alive again. When was the last time you did something just because you wanted to, not because it was expected or safe? I couldn't remember. Every decision I'd made in the past 3 years had been filtered through what David needed, what our marriage required, what the perfect wife would do. I'd become a ghost in my own life. The drive took 15 minutes through the glittering city streets. James's building was one of those luxury high-rises that screamed success, all glass and steel, reaching toward the sky like a middle finger to mediocrity. The doorman nodded respectfully as we passed, and the elevator that whisked us to the 23rd floor was lined with mirrors that reflected my flushed face back at me from every angle. This is beautiful, I breathed as James opened his front door. Beautiful was an understatement. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the entire city spread out below us like a carpet of diamonds. The furniture was all clean lines and rich leather, masculine but sophisticated. It felt like a man's space, not the boy's apartment David still maintained with his gaming setup and beer can collection. Wine, James asked, moving to a bar cart that probably cost more than my car. Please. He poured 2 glasses of something red and expensive while I walked to the windows, trying to process what was happening. This morning I'd been planning to accept David's proposal. Now I was standing in another man's penthouse, my marriage hanging by a thread I was actively cutting. You look like you're thinking too hard, James said, appearing beside me with the wine. I'm trying to figure out who I am anymore, I admitted, accepting the glass. The woman who came to dinner tonight isn't someone I recognise. Maybe she's who you were always supposed to be? James's free hand came up to brush a strand of hair from my face, and the simple touch sent electricity down my spine. Maybe you've been playing a role for so long that you forgot your real character. We settled on his leather sectional, the city lights creating a romantic backdrop that felt like something from a movie. This was what David should have planned for our anniversary. Something spectacular, memorable, worthy of the occasion. Instead, he'd abandoned me for his ex-girlfriend's scraped knee. Tell me something about yourself that David doesn't know, James said, turning to face me on the couch. The question caught me off guard. What do you mean? I mean, something real. Something you've never shared with him because he's never bothered to ask or never listened when you tried to tell him. I thought about it, swirling the wine in my glass. The truth was, there were dozens of things David didn't know about me anymore. I still write, I said finally. Poetry, mostly. Terrible, angsty poetry about feeling invisible and wanting more from life. That doesn't sound terrible. It sounds honest. David found my notebook once and laughed. Said it was like reading a teenager's diary. I stopped leaving it where he could see it. James's jaw tightened. That's not support. That's emotional sabotage. The validation in his words was like a drug. For 3 years, I'd wondered if I was being oversensitive, if my needs were unreasonable. Hearing James confirm my feelings made something inside me unfurl. What about you? I asked. What don't I know about the mysterious James Peterson? He smiled, but it was tinged with something darker. I've been in love with you since the day we met. I've spent the last 1.5 years watching David take you for granted and fantasizing about showing you how a man should really treat a woman like you. The confession hit me like a physical touch. James, I know it's inappropriate. I know you're married, but Rachel, watching him ignore you, dismiss your dreams, abandon you for his ex-girlfriend, it's been torture. Do you have any idea how incredible you are? How any man should feel like the luckiest bastard alive just to be in the same room as you? His words were everything I'd been starving for. When was the last time David had looked at me with even a fraction of this intensity? When had he last made me feel like I was worth pursuing, worth fighting for? This is crazy, I whispered, but I was already leaning closer to him. The best things usually are, he replied, his hand coming up to cut my face. The kiss was inevitable, electric, everything my marriage wasn't. James kissed me like he'd been dying to do it for months, like I was water and he'd been wandering in the desert. I responded with a desperation that surprised me, my hands fisting in his sweater, pulling him closer. When we broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. Stay tonight. It wasn't really a question. We both knew I was already staying, already crossing every line that mattered. My phone was buzzing in my purse, probably David wondering where I was, but I couldn't bring myself to care. Yes, I whispered. What happened next was a revelation. James didn't just touch me, he worshipped me. Every kiss was reverent, every caress deliberate, like he'd been memorizing my body in his mind for months and was finally allowed to explore the reality. He made me feel beautiful, desired, alive in ways I'd forgotten were possible. Later, lying in his king-sized bed, with silk sheets that probably cost more than my monthly salary, I felt transformed. The woman who'd sat alone at that restaurant table felt like a stranger. This new version of myself, confident, wanted, powerful, was someone I barely recognized, but already loved. What are you thinking? James asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on my bare shoulder. I'm thinking I should feel guilty, I said honestly, but I don't. I feel reborn. Good. He pressed a kiss to my temple. Guilt is what they use to keep you small, compliant. You have nothing to feel guilty about. My phone had been buzzing intermittently from my purse in the living room. Short bursts, then longer stretches of silence, then more buzzing. David was clearly trying to reach me, probably wondering why I wasn't home yet. You should probably check that, James said gently, noticing my attention drift toward the sound. I padded to the living room in James's dress shirt, feeling sexier than I had in years. My phone showed 12 missed calls from David and a progression of increasingly frantic texts. Just left the hospital. Sarah's fine now, just a sprained ankle. Where are you? Your car's not in the driveway. Rachel, I'm getting worried. This isn't like you. Call me back, now. I've checked everywhere. Where the hell are you? If you're trying to teach me a lesson, point taken. Come home. Rachel, I'm calling the police if I don't hear from you. The last text was sent 20 minutes ago. David was panicking, probably for the first time in our entire relationship. The man who'd never worried about my feelings was finally experiencing what it felt like to be left wondering. Everything okay? James appeared behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist, his bare chest warm against my back. David's losing his mind. He's threatening to call the police. Are you going to call him back? I stared at the phone at 3 years of unanswered needs and ignored anniversaries and last-minute cancellations for Sarah's emergencies. At a husband who was finally experiencing what it felt like to be the one left waiting and worrying. Not yet, I said, turning in James's arms. Let him sweat for once. Let him know what it feels like to have the person you love disappear without explanation. James smiled, but I could see concern in his eyes. When you do go home, this is going to be nuclear. I know. The thought should have terrified me, but instead it felt liberating. Maybe it needs to be nuclear. Maybe our marriage has been dying such a slow death that it needs to be completely destroyed before anything real can be built. And what do you want to build? I looked at this man who'd shown me what it felt like to be chosen, to be the first option instead of the backup plan. I want something real, something where I matter. You matter to me. His voice was fierce, possessive. You matter more than you know. We went back to bed, but sleep was impossible. I kept thinking about David at home, probably pacing our bedroom, calling my friends, maybe even driving around looking for me. For the first time in our marriage, I was the mystery, the one with power. At 5:30 a.m., I decided it was time. James was sleeping peacefully beside me, and I carefully extracted myself from his arms to retrieve my phone. The missed calls had multiplied. David, my sister, even my mother. He'd called in reinforcements. I dialed David's number. He answered on the first ring. Rachel, Jesus Christ, where are you? I've been up all night. I was about to call the police. His voice was raw with exhaustion and panic. Good. Now he knew how it felt. I'm fine, David. Fine? You disappear for 8 hours without a word and you're fine? Where are you? I could hear the desperation in his voice, the fear. This was a man who'd never had to wonder where I was, never had to worry about losing me because I'd always been there, reliable and predictable and safe. I'm exactly where I need to be, I said calmly. What does that mean? Rachel, you're scaring me. This isn't like you. Maybe you don't know me as well as you think you do. The silence stretched between us, loaded with implications. When he spoke again, his voice was smaller, uncertain. Are you with someone? The question hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. I could end this now, could lie and say I was at a hotel or a friend's house. I could give him the easy way out, let him keep believing that his wife would always be there no matter how badly he treated her. But I was done making things easy for David. Yes, I said simply. The sound he made was somewhere between a gasp and a sob. Who? Someone who makes me feel like I matter. Someone who chose me over everyone else in his life. Someone who doesn't make me compete with his ex-girlfriend for attention. Rachel, please, come home. We can work through this. I love you. Do you? I asked. Because love isn't just words, David. Love is choices. And for 3 years, you've chosen Sarah over me every single time. That's not true. It is true, and we both know it. I looked back toward the bedroom where James was sleeping, this man who'd made me feel alive again in the span of one evening. I'm coming home later today. We need to talk. When? When I'm ready. I hung up before he could respond, turned off my phone and went back to bed. James stirred as I slipped back under the covers, pulling me against him. "How did it go?" he murmured against my hair. "It's done," I said. "There's no going back now." "Good," he said, his arms tightening around me, "because I'm not letting you go without a fight." As I drifted off to sleep in another man's arms, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Anticipation for what came next. The old Rachel would have rushed home, apologised, tried to fix things. But the new Rachel, the one James had awakened, was going to make David wait, was going to make him wonder and worry and finally understand what he'd lost. The revenge was just beginning, and it was more intoxicating than any wine James could have poured. I woke up at noon in James's arms, sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. For a moment, I forgot where I was, forgot what I'd done. Then, reality crashed back, the dinner, the night, the phone call with David. The point of no return I'd crossed without looking back. James was already awake, watching me with an intensity that made my stomach flutter. "Good morning, beautiful." "Is it still morning?" I asked, stretching against his silk sheets. "Barely. But I've been thinking..." His expression grew serious. "About what happens next?" Before I could respond, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I turned it back on to 17 new messages, all from David. The most recent one made my blood run cold. "I know you're with James. I'm coming to get you." I sat up so fast I nearly gave myself whiplash. "He knows. David knows I'm with you." James read the message over my shoulder, his jaw clenching. How could he possibly know? My mind raced through the possibilities. Your car. He must have seen it at the restaurant, or maybe someone from the office saw us together. I started getting dressed, panic rising in my chest. "James, if he comes here, let him come." James's voice was steel. "I'm not hiding from your husband, Rachel. What we did last night wasn't a mistake or some dirty secret. You deserve better than him, and I'm not ashamed of showing you what that looks like." But I was already pulling on my dress from the night before, my mind spinning with implications. David, knowing about James, changed everything. This wasn't just about me having a secret affair anymore. This was about to become a very public explosion that would destroy careers, friendships, everything. "I have to go home," I said. "I have to face this. Not alone." James was getting dressed too, his movements quick and determined. "I'm driving you." "James, no. If David sees you, if David sees me, then he sees me. Rachel, I meant what I said last night. I'm not letting you face this alone." 20 minutes later, we were pulling into my driveway. David's car was there, along with 2 others I didn't recognise. As we got closer, I saw him through the living room window, pacing like a caged animal. He wasn't alone. Sarah was there, sitting on my couch like she owned the place. And so was someone else, a man I didn't recognise in a suit. "Who's that?" James asked, following my gaze. I had a sinking feeling I knew exactly who it was. "Probably a lawyer." James parked behind David's car, effectively blocking him in. "Are you ready for this?" No, I wasn't ready for any of this. But the woman I'd been last night, the one who'd chosen herself for the first time in 3 years, wouldn't back down now. "Let's go!" David must have heard the car door slam because he was at the front door before we even reached the porch. His face was a storm of rage and devastation, his hair dishevelled like he'd been running his hands through it all night. "So, it's true," he said, his voice barely controlled. "You actually spent the night with my boss." "Hello, David," James said calmly, his hand finding the small of my back in a possessive gesture that made David's eyes flash with fury. "Don't you dare touch her in front of me," David snarled. "Haven't you done enough damage?" "I haven't done anything," James replied evenly. Your wife came to me because you abandoned her on your anniversary. I just gave her what she deserved: attention, respect, appreciation. David's face went red. You manipulative bastard. You've been waiting for this, haven't you? Circling like a vulture, waiting for a chance to destroy my marriage. Your marriage was already destroyed, I said quietly, finding my voice. I just finally stopped pretending it wasn't. David's attention snapped to me, and I saw something I'd never seen before in his eyes. Fear. Real, bone-deep terror that he was losing me. Rachel, please, come inside. Let's talk about this privately. No more private conversations, David. I'm done protecting your feelings while you destroy mine. But I followed him inside anyway, James staying close behind me. The living room felt like a war zone. Sarah was perched on the edge of my couch, her supposedly injured ankle propped dramatically on a pillow, tears streaming down her face. The man in the suit stood near the window, looking deeply uncomfortable. Sarah, what are you doing in my house? I asked. I called her, David said quickly. After you told me you were with someone, I called Sarah to come over. I needed support, and she's been my friend since college. I know. I looked at Sarah, really looked at her. She was beautiful in that fragile, helpless way that some men found irresistible. But there was something else in her eyes now, something calculating. Funny how your ankle injury cleared up enough for you to come rushing over here. Sarah's tears increased. David needed me. When he called and said you'd cheated on him, that you'd spent the night with another man, I couldn't just leave him alone. Cheated? I laughed, but there was no humour in it. David, how many times have you abandoned me for Sarah's emergencies? How many dates, anniversaries, important moments have you missed because she called crying? That's different. It's not different. The words exploded out of me with 3 years of suppressed rage. It's exactly the same, except I actually left you alone for one night, while you've been emotionally cheating on me with her for our entire marriage. The room went dead silent. Even Sarah stopped crying. The man in the suit cleared his throat. Perhaps I should go, he said. This seems like a family matter. No, stay, David said quickly. Rachel, this is Michael Richardson. He's a divorce attorney. The words hit me like a slap. You called a divorce lawyer before even talking to me. You spent the night with another man, David shouted. What was I supposed to think? You were supposed to think about why your wife felt so neglected that she turned to someone else for the attention you couldn't be bothered to give her. James stepped forward. David, maybe it's time you heard some hard truths. Rachel has spent 3 years being the perfect wife while you treated her like a convenient backup plan. Last night, she got a taste of what it feels like to be someone's priority. Can you blame her for wanting more of that? Shut up, David snarled. This is between me and my wife. Actually, I said, my voice getting stronger, it's not just between us anymore, because I've made a decision. Everyone in the room turned to look at me. This was it. The moment that would define the rest of my life. I could apologize, beg for forgiveness, go back to being the understanding wife who accepted crumbs, or I could choose the woman I'd discovered I could be. I want a divorce, I said clearly. David's face crumpled. Rachel, no, please, we can work through this. I'll change, I promise. I'll put you first. I'll stop dropping everything for Sarah. You'll stop until the next emergency, I interrupted. David, you've shown me who you are for 3 years. Last night, James showed me who I could be with someone who actually values me. So, that's it? Sarah spoke up, her voice sharp. You're going to destroy your marriage for one night with another man? I turned to her, and suddenly everything clicked into place. The timing of her calls, the dramatic emergencies that always seemed to happen when David and I had plans. The way she looked at him, even now, like he belonged to her. "Sarah," I said slowly, "how long have you been in love with my husband?" Her face went white. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I think you do. I think you've been sabotaging my marriage from day one, calling with emergencies whenever David and I had something special planned. I think you've been waiting for him to realize he made a mistake marrying me instead of you." "That's ridiculous," David said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Is it?" I looked at him. "When did Sarah move back to town, David?" "About 3 years ago, but..." "Right after our honeymoon. And when did her emergency start?" David's mouth opened and closed like a fish. The lawyer was taking notes now, probably seeing dollar signs. "Sarah," I said, turning back to her, "did you hurt your ankle on purpose last night?" "Of course not." "Because it's amazing how quickly you recovered. Almost like it was never really that bad to begin with." James was watching this exchange with fascination. "Rachel, what are you thinking?" I'm thinking," I said, pulling out my phone, "that someone with Sarah's supposed medical phobia wouldn't have dozens of pictures of herself in hospitals on social media. I'd looked her up last night while James was sleeping, finally letting myself investigate the woman who'd haunted my marriage. Her Instagram was full of dramatic hospital selfies, doctor visits, medical bracelet fashion shots. For someone terrified of medical settings, she sure spent a lot of time in them. "Show them the pictures, Sarah," I said. "I don't know what you mean. The pictures from last night? The ones you posted on Instagram of your terrible injury?" Sarah's face went from white to red. David slowly pulled out his phone, and I watched his expression change as he scrolled through her social media. "Sarah," he said quietly, "this picture shows you dancing at a club. It's timestamped 2 hours after you called me crying about your ankle." The room exploded. Sarah started crying. Real tears this time. Tears of being caught. David started shouting accusations. The lawyer was frantically scribbling notes. But I felt nothing but calm, because finally, the truth was out. "It doesn't matter," I said, cutting through the chaos. "Sarah, David, you two deserve each other. You can have your dramatic, crisis-filled relationship. I'm done being a part of it." I turned to James, who was looking at me with something close to awe. "I'm ready to go now." "Where?" David asked desperately. "Rachel, where are you going?" I looked at my husband, soon to be ex-husband, and felt only pity. "I'm going to start living my life. You should try it sometime." As James and I walked out of that house, leaving behind the wreckage of my marriage and Sarah's lies, I felt lighter than I had in years. My phone buzzed with a text from James. "Dinner tomorrow night? I know this amazing little place." I smiled and typed back, "It's a date, but this time nothing is going to interrupt us." Because sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's getting everything you deserve and walking away from everything that was holding you back. And as James took my hand and we drove toward whatever came next, I knew I'd finally chosen the right man for the job. The woman who'd sat alone at that anniversary dinner was gone forever. In her place was someone stronger, someone who knew her worth, someone who would never again settle for being anyone's second choice. And that was the sweetest revenge of all.